Welcome back to another episode of Create a New Tomorrow. I am your host, Ari Gronich, and I am back with Dr. David Gruder. He is a 12-time award-winning integrative psychologist. And more than that, he's an organizational psychologist. He has done some amazing things. I call him the guru of gurus, the mentor of mentors. And welcome back, David. I am so glad that we're able to do this again and provide so much more of your wisdom to the audience.
It's a pleasure to be back with you, Ari.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in organizational psychology. Why did you choose that field specifically? And what it is that you're looking to create in this new tomorrow, a new world?
Mm-hmm. So how I got into the field kind of starts at age 16. I was expected to become a professional musician and was certainly on track for that. I had started performing as a child in a lot of different capacities. And so I was not being asked, what university are you going to? I was being asked, what conservatory are you going to? And by the time I was 16, in some way that is still kind of magical and mysterious to me, I knew that even though music was and is my first love, psychology was my calling. And I also knew that I was called to have impact on elevating society, not just on individuals.
That's awesome. You know, one of the things that I say a lot is we made this shit up and we can make it up better.
Yeah.
I think that people forget in many cases that the society as it is a figment of our imagination. We created it. We created the buildings. We created the design of the houses. We created the design of the societies. And when something is suboptimal, not up to performance standards, right? Then it's kind of incumbent upon us to recreate it in a different, better way. But we have organized around our creation. And there's a psychological element to this is how we live, and this is how we're always going to live, and this is how we should live. And we want to go back to the way that it was, right? Or the way that we think it should be. How do you break through that kind of organizational, whether it's in corporations, in governments, in whatever, or in families, or in yourself, even the organizational, how you've organized your own being? What would be some tools, some ways that people could think about this a little bit differently so they'd be open to the possibilities?
Oh, great question. I agree with you completely. We have massive imaginations as human beings. We're incredible, natural, compulsive storytellers. We make up stories left and right. And so, yes, everything we see around us is of our creation. We invented an imaginary thing called a corporation, corporate structure. We invented an imaginary thing called money. I mean, we could go down a whole long list of things that we invented, and then those things started being or seeming real to us. So the tail's wagging the dog in that sense. And so where this starts is with a personal ownership piece and a societal ownership piece. So the personal ownership piece for me has to do with responsibility. I and I alone am responsible for the parts of reality that I pay attention to, for the stories I make up about what those parts of reality that I'm paying attention to mean, for the emotions that the stories I tell myself about the parts of reality that I'm attending to activate in me, and for the words and actions that the emotions I'm having about the stories I'm telling myself about the parts of reality that I'm paying attention to have on those to whom I'm in relationship or with whom I'm in relationship.
You know, that's really interesting. I think a lot of people believe that they have to focus the exact opposite of what you just said, right? Self, family, city, county. I mean, it goes out, and then eventually maybe we'll get to the world at large, right? Or humanity at large, and so forth. I never quite understood the idea of patriotism. And I'll tell you why. Patriotism to me has always been the same thing as being a white supremacist or saying to somebody, I'm proud to be white, I'm proud to be black, I'm proud to be blue, I'm proud to be green. It's something that you have no control over where you were born, right? So you're born in Latvia versus being born in the US. So all of a sudden you must be a lower form of human because you were born there, but you had no choice in that. Just like you must be, if you're black, you must be a lower form of a human being because of your color, even though you had no particular choice in that, and it really relates nothing to character. So how do we evolve beyond the label of, well, any of the labels, but beyond the label of patriotism, beyond the label of I'm proud because of what I am versus what I do?
Right. Oh my gosh, there are so many layers to this question. You know, let me start with what you said about in this narrative of a person saying, I, I, I can't help where I was born or the color of my skin. Even that is open to question. You know, there are metaphysical belief systems that that say that we do choose our life circumstances. So the humility piece with this is to remember that all belief systems, every belief system this planet has ever seen, is based on its own set of core assumptions, such as I I chose where, the circumstances under which I was born. I didn't choose those core assumptions that are neither verifiable nor unverifiable, that can neither be proved nor disproved. And when we forget that, we move straight into arrogance. My belief system is the right belief system because, after all of the other beliefs that my core assumptions are based on make sense with my core assumptions. So my belief system must be right. Well, it doesn't must be right. That's erroneous thinking. That's arrogant thinking. And the reason that's important to the question that you were asking is because when I approach these kinds of questions of paradigm, of belief system from a place of humility, then I get to see everyone else as my brothers and my sisters. I get to see people who have different life experiences from mine that have lessons and wisdom to teach me, just as I have certain life experiences that might have wisdom to offer others. And it's not a competition over who has more wisdom for whom. It is this delicious opportunity. Life is this delicious opportunity to compare notes and learn from each other and discover more about the bigger picture from the smaller slices that we each see individually.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was watching a video recently, and it was a gentleman who, what they say infiltrated the KKK. He was a black gentleman, but he didn't infiltrate. He just started having conversations with one of the grand poobah.
Yes.
I don't know what they called them, grandmasters of the KKK,
Yep.
and over the years they became very close friends, began to trust each other because they got to know each other.
Yes.
Then I believe that it's somewhere around 60, 70 different members of the KKK ended up denouncing that belief system. They
Mm-hmm.
still liked the camaraderie that came from being part of the group, right? But they denounced what the group was focused on, I guess you could say. And it's an interesting form of psychology. You get to learn about somebody or about a different culture, and all of a sudden it opens your eyes and heart, right? They say that the cure to racism is traveling. What do you think of that statement?
Yes. The cure to centrism, any kind of ethnocentrism, is to be exposed to other cultures. The conversations that I have with my fellow Americans who have not traveled extensively outside of the United States are profoundly different from the conversations that I have with my fellow Americans who have traveled extensively. And by travel, I don't mean that somebody has gone to another country and then they've stayed in American hotels and eaten American foods and gotten tours around whatever that location is by American tour guides. That's not traveling. That's pretending to travel. I'm talking about the real deal. And when we're exposed to other cultures, if we have any kind of teachability in us at all, we can't help but be impacted. We can't help but have our worldview expanded. When people are very, very ethnocentric, whatever the centrism is about, American centric, let's say, because they've never traveled outside of the United States. They may not have even traveled to all the different sections of our country, because our country is a bunch of mini countries culturally. You know, the culture in the deep South is not the same as the culture in New York or as the culture in California, et cetera, et cetera. The blindness that people end up having, they don't know it. I call it a spell. Most people in my experience are under a cultural spell. They don't know how to see that they're under a spell, and therefore they don't know that there's something to get free of. And it's incredibly damaging.
Yeah, that is so true. You know, my grandfather came over to this country when he was 12 years old, I believe, by himself on a boat through Ellis Island, became a multi millionaire, lost it all, gained it all, lost it all, gained it all. But he spoke 11 languages, 11, Austria, Hungarian, Yiddish, Hebrew, Spanish, French. I mean, he spoke German, a lot of languages, because, as a salesman, that was his job. But even before he was 12, growing up in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, he was initially taught, and this was in maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s, he was taught these languages as just, you're being born, you're growing up, and you're learning. My parents, on the other hand, my dad, who speaks German and Spanish and English and Yiddish, right? But they only spoke Spanish if they didn't want us to know what they were saying. Right? And so I took a lot of years of Spanish, but I never learned how to speak it fluently, or fluidly, I should say. Same with Hebrew. I took Hebrew school, but when I went to Israel, I couldn't speak Hebrew for anything based on how they speak it on the streets, right? So
Absolutely.
I felt, and every time I've traveled, I have felt so culturally inept because of my lack of being able to speak another language. So what you just said is so true. And I really appreciate you saying that, because when you speak somebody else's language, you get to know their culture much better, right? Especially if you could dream in their language. Did I lose you?
Ah, there you are. You froze for a moment. Yes, yes, indeed. So you and I came from very similar families. Both sides of my family came from what was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire. One side of my family came from the Austrian side, the other side of the family came from the Hungarian side. And my parents as well, both of whom were born in the United States. It's their parents who came over from Europe. My parents, when they didn't want my brother and me to understand what they were talking about, that's when they talked Yiddish. And when I first started traveling extensively internationally in the 1970s, what I discovered, to my great delight, was that the two fastest ways to access the heart of a country that I was in were to speak its language and eat its food and hang out with people who were from that country rather than go looking for other Americans to hang out with. And I got huge enrichment from the willingness to be a clumsy imbecile in another language, because what I found very rapidly was that most people in the countries that I visited were very appreciative and forgiving of my inability to speak their language, simply because I was authentically attempting to speak their language. And it opened up all kinds of doors.
That's a very profound thing. And you know, I'm going to ask you a question I haven't asked anybody, which is, if I was to ask you a question that would sum up the sum total of everything we've talked about, right? And give us that path forward so that we can create a new tomorrow, so that we can activate our vision for a better world, and so that we can be these impactful, integrous humans that we were designed to be. What would that path be?
It would be the path toward what you've heard me say. It's the path toward self-sovereignty that serves us all. It's the intersection of self-responsibility in the context of living in a society where we are responsible for ourselves and we are contributing to the common good, not one over the other. Self-sovereignty that serves us all.
That's beautiful. And I so appreciate you being here. And I think we've had plenty of tools that somebody can take away from this conversation and start applying. If you were to give just one other tool for the how, so that somebody can take that conceptual knowledge and wisdom that we just spent an hour and a half disseminating, right? One simple tool to activate that in them, what would that tool be?
The tool would be an imagery, a piece of imagery that's about shifting our mindset. And the imagery is of a jigsaw puzzle. So imagine a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces are out on the table and they're all upside down. And we're in a group of people and we're all busy turning all the pieces over so that we see what's on each piece. And then, sure enough, some of us cluster around finding pieces that are the corners of the puzzle. And others of us cluster around finding pieces that are the edges of the puzzle. And others of us start making discoveries about parts of inside the puzzle that are elements of the picture that the puzzle is creating, like a window or a door or a flower or whatever. And imagine that one other thing, which is that unlike a typical jigsaw puzzle where on the cover of the box you see what the puzzle is supposed to look like when it's done, there's no box. So we don't know what the puzzle's supposed to look like when it's done. And we have two choices. We can either start to polarize and accuse the cornerists of being horrific people because all they care about is the corners, or the edgists, or the flowerists, or the doorists, or the windowists, rather than saying, isn't it wonderful that you're so focused on the corners that you're identifying those on behalf of all of us, and the edges and the flowers and the doors and the windows, so that we can co-discover together what the picture is meant to look like when it's all put together. That vision of synergy, of collaboration, if we can keep that in mind and in our hearts and in our spirits when we are interacting with other people who have different perspectives from ours, the magic is just going to start happening. That's the last tool I'll leave you with.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you, audience, for sticking with us, listening to this episode. And I wish you a really, really blessed day. And I wish you the cojones to challenge yourself to become the person that you know you are already inside, and to shift what you might be doing now to create something more based on results, performance, and create a better world with us, collaborate with us, so that we together can bring in and usher in this new society that is focused on creating a world we all can live in harmony with nature. And I bless you all. Hope you have a healthy day. This has been another episode of Create a New Tomorrow with your host, Ari Gronich. And thank you so much, David Gruder, for being here. We really appreciate all of your wisdom and experience.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.